Amina Jackson stood as a towering figure in a world that often tried to shrink her. A black woman born into a society rife with racial barriers, she had defied every expectation to become the CEO of Jackson Air, an airline she'd forged through sheer grit and brilliance. Her skin color, a source of pride, had also been a battleground marked by years of sidelong glances, dismissive remarks, and the constant need to prove her worth twice over. Yet, she'd turned those challenges into a ladder, climbing to a position where her name was synonymous with innovation and leadership. She built Jackson Air to be more than a business. It was a statement that excellence knows no color, and dignity is non-negotiable. Little did she know, her own creation would soon test that vision in the most personal way, revealing that prejudice could lurk even within the empire she ruled. She moved through the terminal like a seasoned chess player navigating a crowded park, each step calculated, each observation precise. The cacophony of JFK washed over her, the screech of wheeled suitcases, the urgent pronouncements from the PA system, the fragmented conversations buzzing in a dozen languages. But it didn't penetrate her focus. She was a fortress of calm in a storm of travel anxiety. She bypassed the snaking security line, flashing her global entry card with a polite nod to the TSA agent. Years of consistent punctuality and meticulous preparation had earned her this privilege, a small but significant reward for a life dedicated to efficiency. She wasn't arrogant, just disciplined. She'd learned early that success demanded a ruthless commitment to optimizing every aspect of her life, from her workout schedule to her travel arrangements. The gate area was a teeming mass of humanity, a vibrant tapestry woven with faces, oversized backpacks, and the restless energy of delayed flights. Amina spotted an empty seat near a charging station and settled in, pulling out her noise-canceling headphones. She didn't need to hear the gate agent's repeated apologies or the frustrated sighs of her fellow passengers. She had a company to run her company, Jackson Air, a legacy she'd built from the ground up. Every minute counted. She reviewed a presentation one last time, the crisp figures and compelling projections dancing across her tablet screen. This wasn't just a routine flight. It was a chance to oversee her airline's operations firsthand, to ensure her vision of excellence and equity was being upheld. The boarding announcement cut through the digital silence. Priority boarding for first-class and VIP passengers on Flight 347 to London Heathrow was now open. Amina rose smoothly, her tailored suit resisting wrinkles. She joined the short queue, her boarding pass already displayed on her phone. The gate agent, a young woman with weary eyes and a forced smile, scanned her pass with a practiced flick of the wrist. "Enjoy your flight, Ms. Jackson," she said, her voice laced with a hint of resignation. Amina offered a genuine smile in return. "Thank you, I appreciate it." She walked down the jet bridge, the familiar scent of jet fuel and recycled air filling her nostrils. The interior of the plane, her plane was a welcome oasis of calm, a sanctuary of muted colors and hushed tones. She found her seat, 1A, a spacious haven of leather and polished wood. She stowed her briefcase in the overhead compartment and settled in, adjusting the lumbar support and stretching her legs. A woman in a crisp business suit was already seated in 1B. She looked up, her face etched with a polite but strained smile. "Good morning," she offered. "Eleanor Vance?" She extended a hand. "Amina Jackson," she replied, shaking her hand. Eleanor's grip was weak, her palms slightly damp. "Pleasure to meet you." "Likewise," Eleanor said, quickly withdrawing her hand. "Big meeting in London, I presume?" "Something like that," Amina said, choosing her words carefully. She didn't feel the need to reveal that she owned the airline they were flying on. "And you?" "Oh, just a routine check-in with our European office," Eleanor said, her voice a little too bright. Amina raised an eyebrow slightly, but said nothing. She sensed the flicker of unease in Eleanor's eyes, a subtle discomfort she decided to ignore. She had more important things to focus on. The flight attendants bustled about, offering pre-flight drinks and warm towels. Amina declined both, opting instead to review her notes one last time. She felt a surge of anticipation, a familiar blend of excitement and nervous energy. This trip could reinforce everything she'd built, not just for her, but for the countless employees and passengers who relied on Jackson Air. As the plane began to taxi, she glanced out the window. The airport was a hive of activity, a constant stream of planes taking off and landing, each carrying its own cargo of hopes, dreams, and anxieties. She thought of her husband Daniel and her two children, Maya and David. She missed them already. She pulled out her phone and sent Daniel a quick text. Taxiing now. Love you all. See you soon. She powered down her phone and closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She pictured Daniel's warm smile, Maya's infectious laughter, and David's boundless curiosity. They were her anchor, her inspiration, the reason she pushed herself to achieve more. A sudden commotion broke the peaceful atmosphere. A raised voice, sharp and insistent, cut through the low hum of the engines. Amina opened her eyes, her senses immediately on alert. She saw a flight attendant, a woman in a neatly pressed uniform, arguing with another staff member near the front of the plane. The flight attendant, Eleanor Vance, looked flustered and overwhelmed, her face flushed with anxiety. Her voice, though strained, was barely audible over the increasingly loud protests of a man in a rumpled suit. "I don't understand," the man was saying, his voice dripping with entitlement. "I was told this seat was available. I paid extra for this seat." Amina frowned. Something felt off. The man's tone, his posture, it all reeked of privilege and arrogance. She sat up straighter, her senses heightened. This was more than just a simple seating dispute, she could feel it in her gut. The calm, analytical part of her brain kicked into high gear, assessing the situation, analyzing the players. Eleanor Vance, her voice trembling slightly, said, "Sir, I understand your frustration, but there seems to be a mistake. Your seat is actually in premium economy." "Premium economy?" the man scoffed. "Do you know who I am?" Amina's jaw tightened. She knew where this was going. She just hoped she was wrong. The plane lurched forward, beginning its ascent. She was trapped now, suspended between earth and sky, about to witness something that would test her principles and challenge her very core. She just didn't know how much yet. The boarding process had lulled into a manageable rhythm, the overhead bins gorged with carry-ons, the aisle finally clear of stragglers. Amina reopened her laptop, the faint hum of the cabin a soothing counterpoint to the frenetic energy she'd felt only moments before. She was reviewing operational reports for Jackson Air when a commotion erupted near the front of the plane. A booming voice cut through the relative calm. "This is an outrage!" "Absolutely unacceptable." Amina glanced up. A man, florid-faced and perspiring despite the airplane's air conditioning, was blocking the aisle. He was dressed in an expensive but ill-fitting suit. His tie loosened, his hair a carefully constructed yet clearly failing architectural feat. This had to be Mr. Abery. Eleanor Vance, her earlier nervousness amplified tenfold, hurried toward the man, her face pale. "Mr. Abery, sir, I'm so sorry for the delay. There seems to be some confusion regarding your seat assignment." "Confusion?" Abery roared, his voice echoing through the cabin. "There's no confusion! I paid for a first-class seat, and I expect a first-class seat. This is simply not on." He gestured wildly toward Amina, who was now watching the scene with detached curiosity. "She's in my seat." Eleanor wrung her hands, her eyes darting between Abery and Amina. "Sir, the manifest there must be a mistake. Let me just check." She pulled out her handheld device, her fingers trembling as she navigated the screen. Abery was having none of it. He pushed past Eleanor, his bulk filling the narrow aisle. He stopped directly in front of Amina, his eyes narrowed into slits. "You. Out of the seat. Now." Amina calmly closed her laptop. She met Abery's gaze, her expression neutral. "I'm sorry, sir, but I believe you have the wrong seat. I have a confirmed reservation for this seat." She held up her boarding pass, displaying the seat number prominently. Abery scoffed, his face reddening further. "Don't play games with me. I know who you are. You're not supposed to be here. This is my seat, and I intend to have it." He leaned closer, his breath hot and smelling faintly of stale whiskey. "Don't make me call security. It'll be much more unpleasant for you." Amina remained seated, unyielding. "Sir, I suggest you check with the flight attendant. I have a valid boarding pass. I'm not moving until this is resolved properly." She spoke calmly, her voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of steel. Eleanor, hovering nervously behind Abery, stammered, "Mr. Abery, perhaps if you could just wait a moment. I've contacted the ground crew and they're looking into it. There must be a simple explanation." Her voice lacked conviction, her words sounding hollow even to her own ears. Abery ignored her, focusing his attention solely on Amina. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Sitting in my seat, pretending you belong here? Well, let me tell you something. People like you don't belong in first class." He punctuated his words with a sharp jab of his finger toward Amina's chest. Amina didn't flinch. She simply raised an eyebrow, her gaze unwavering. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension hanging in the air. She knew that any reaction, any show of anger or frustration would only escalate the situation. She needed to remain calm, to control the narrative. This was not just about a seat, it was about principle. She had earned her place on this flight more than anyone, as the owner of the airline, and she wouldn't be bullied out of it. Eleanor, sensing the situation spiraling out of control, made a desperate attempt to intervene. "Mr. Abery, please, let's not cause a scene. I'm sure we can find a solution. Perhaps there's another seat available in first class, or even an upgrade in business class." Her voice was barely a whisper, her suggestion weak and unconvincing. Abery rounded on her, his anger now directed at her incompetence. "Upgrade? Are you serious? I paid for first class. I expect first class. This is your fault you messed up the reservations and now you expect me to settle for less." He pointed a trembling finger at her. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers about this, young lady. Mark my words." Eleanor visibly wilted under his tirade, her shoulders slumped, her eyes filled with tears. She looked like she was about to faint. Amina felt a flicker of sympathy for her, but she also recognized Eleanor's complicity in the situation. She knew something wasn't right and was clearly trying to avoid confronting the truth. Abery turned back to Amina, his face contorted with rage. "I'm giving you one last chance. Get out of the seat." He balled his fists, his knuckles white. Amina remained seated, her gaze steady. "I'm afraid I must decline your offer, sir." The words were polite, almost deferential, but the underlying message was clear she wouldn't be moved. The hum of the airplane seemed to intensify, amplifying the tension in the cabin. Everyone was waiting, holding their breath, wondering what would happen next. "That's my seat, girl." "Are you deaf?" Abery's face, a roadmap of broken capillaries, throbbed with incandescent fury. His pronouncement lingered, a fetid cloud in the close air of the cabin. A nervous rustle swept through nearby rows. The set of Amina's jaw telegraphed suppressed anger. "I assure you, my hearing is quite acute," Amina replied, her tone like honed steel, each syllable precise. "And I believe my position is also clear. I possess a valid ticket for this allocation, and I intend to occupy it." Abery encroached further into Amina's personal space, his exhalations a miasma of cheap whiskey and unearned superiority. "Think your fancy money buys you respect, eh? Reality check, this ain't a handout. Some folks are simply better equipped for certain accommodations." A hacking cough punctuated his words, launching droplets onto the immaculate weave of Amina's suit. Amina recoiled almost imperceptibly, a wave of distaste rippling across her features. She dabbed at her lapel with a napkin, her gaze unwavering. The gesture spoke volumes: disdain, defiance, and an unyielding resolve to stand her ground. Eleanor Vance, her face a canvas of raw anxiety, wrung her hands. Perspiration bloomed on her forehead like dewdrops on a spiderweb. "Sir, please," she implored, her voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. "Perhaps we could find a more amicable solution." "Amicable?" Abery bellowed, pivoting toward Eleanor. "She's squatting on a seat that's rightfully mine. Do you comprehend who you're addressing? I'm a platinum elite. I've logged more miles with this airline than you've had birthdays." Eleanor visibly winced, shrinking under the force of his verbal barrage. "I understand, sir, but Ms. Jackson holds a confirmed reservation for this location as well." "Confirmed?" "More like conjured. Probably acquired through some underhanded scheme." "Spare me the platitudes," Abery snarled, turning back to Amina. His eyes narrowed to viper slits. "You know, a few casual conversations, a strategic nudge, and your little venture could encounter unforeseen complications. Deals have a funny way of souring under pressure." A cold dread coiled in Amina's gut. The veiled menace was undeniable. She recognized the leverage Abery commanded, the effortless, unchecked sway of privilege. The argument was no longer about the seat itself, but about reasserting a perceived hierarchy, reminding her of her supposedly subordinate status. "Are you issuing a threat?" Amina inquired, her voice now a glacial current. Abery emitted a short, grating laugh. "Let's just characterize it as an incentive. Vacate the premises, and perhaps, just perhaps, I'll dismiss this entire regrettable incident." Amina regarded him with disbelief. "You're actually serious? You're prepared to jeopardize my peace simply because you were denied your preferred seat? The audacity." She scanned the faces of the other passengers, hoping for a flicker of solidarity, a sign that they recognized the preposterousness of the scenario. Yet most avoided eye contact, feigning indifference, unwilling to become entangled. A smattering surreptitiously captured the drama on their phones. "I will not be moved," Amina declared, her voice ringing with resolute conviction. "I am fully within my rights to be here. Unleash your contacts. I refuse to be intimidated by bullying tactics." Eleanor Vance's composure shattered. She pivoted between Amina and Abery, her eyes darting like a hunted creature. The pressure had become unbearable. "Ms. Jackson," she stammered, her voice barely audible, "I appreciate your position, but perhaps it would simplify matters if you were to relocate to the seat in row 12. It's also a window seat with full recline." Amina stared at her, dumbfounded. "Are you advocating that I yield after everything that's transpired? After the blatant intimidation? You're condoning this reprehensible behavior?" Eleanor averted her gaze, her hands twisting like knotted rope. Ma'am, I'm merely attempting to de-escalate the situation. Mr. Abery represents a highly valued customer and—" "And what?" Amina countered, her voice gaining volume. "And I don't? Is that your implication? That my comfort, my entitlements, my fundamental respect are somehow subservient because he is what, Caucasian, affluent, privileged?" The words hung suspended in the air, stark and inescapable. Eleanor flinched, new tears welling in her eyes. The silence in the cabin possessed a palpable weight. Amina surveyed the landscape of faces the passengers, the cabin crew ultimately settling on Eleanor. She registered trepidation, complicity, a dearth of moral fortitude. She observed a system stacked against her, a realm where intrinsic worth was dictated by external factors. She slowly shook her head, a wave of profound disillusionment engulfing her. "Sacrifice dignity," she murmured, almost as a soliloquy. "That's the true currency at play here." Then, in a swift motion, she unbuckled her seatbelt. Silent fury burned within her. Amina swallowed hard, the bitter taste of injustice stinging her palate. She kept her eyes downcast, a defense against the imagined gazes of pity. Securing her laptop bag, she clumsily fished for her phone, its subtle vibrations signaling the unlock. With a practiced flick, she initiated the voice recorder app, the screen remaining innocuously dark. Every syllable, every intonation from Abery and Eleanor was being covertly documented. She might have conceded this round, but the fight was just beginning. She relocated to the plane's rear, finding her assigned place at 42B. The window, smeared with grime, presented a warped panorama of the dwindling runway. The air back here felt stale, breathed a far cry from the invigorating coolness of first class. She sank into the seat, the coarse upholstery chafing her skin. Shame flared through her, a visceral sensation, a blush crawling up her neck and blooming in her cheeks. She squeezed her eyes shut, attempting to banish the memory, but it persisted. Abery's self-satisfied smirk, Eleanor's imploring expression, the muted murmurs of fellow passengers. She hadn't merely been moved, she'd been diminished. Her accomplishments, her dedication, her deserved place, all negated by her skin tone and the ignorance of her own staff. Her grip tightened on the armrest, knuckles bleaching white. "Don't let it poison you, Amina," she silently urged herself. "Don't let them break you." This wasn't just about a seat assignment. This was about dignity, about equity, about the subtle, insidious ways prejudice still thrived even within her own company. It was about the unending stream of microaggressions, the tacit presumptions, the perpetual pressure to excel, to outperform, in order to gain even modest recognition. She opened her laptop. The familiar illumination of the display offered meager solace. She attempted to immerse herself in her operational reports, the very purpose of this trip, but the words danced before her eyes, blurring into meaningless shapes. Abery's face kept surfacing, a mocking emblem of privilege. She snapped the laptop shut, frustration mounting. Anger was a coiled spring, vibrating just beneath the surface. She needed to harness it, to channel it, to transform it into something constructive. She thought of her mother, a woman who had confronted far greater injustices with quiet fortitude and unwavering spirit. "Don't get angry, get strategic," her mother always advised. She reached for her phone once more, her thumb hovering over the recorder icon. She replayed the final seconds, Abery's condescending voice ringing in her ears. "I'm certain we can compensate her appropriately." The word appropriately dripped with arrogance. A surge of something beyond mere anger coursed through Amina. It was a keen, calculating fury. This wasn't simply about monetary compensation. This was about responsibility. This was about exposing the ingrained biases that allowed individuals like Abery and her own staff to wield their ignorance as a weapon. Suddenly, the plane jolted. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an urgent operational issue, we will be returning to the gate at JFK immediately. We apologize for the inconvenience." Amina's eyes narrowed. She knew this wasn't a coincidence. She'd already texted her executive team from the tarmac, alerting them to the situation. The plane turned back, the engines humming with a resigned drone. The instant the plane reached the gate, chaos erupted. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft. Amina rose from her seat in 42B, her posture regal despite the indignity she'd endured. She walked calmly down the aisle, her heels clicking against the floor. Passengers whispered, some recognizing her now as the face of Jackson Air from media coverage. Eleanor Vance stood near the exit, her face ashen, clutching her handheld device. "Ms. Jackson," she stammered, I didn't realize—" "You didn't realize who I was?" Amina cut in, her voice low and steady. "Or you didn't realize that your actions, your prejudice would have consequences?" Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Amina stepped off the plane, her phone already buzzing with updates. Her chief of staff had acted swiftly. Within 5 minutes of the plane's return, an announcement was made. Every staff member involved in the incident, Eleanor Vance and the entire flight crew, was terminated, effective immediately. They had mocked and discriminated against the very woman who signed their paychecks, oblivious to her identity as the owner of Jackson Air. Amina stood in the terminal, watching as the fired employees gathered their belongings, their faces a mixture of shock and shame. She felt no satisfaction, only resolve. This was her airline, her legacy, and she would not tolerate such behavior under her watch. She turned to her team, who had rushed to meet her. "This isn't the end," she said, her voice firm. "We're going to audit every level of this company. Training, hiring, customer service, everything. I built Jackson Air to be a beacon of excellence and equity, and I'll tear it down and rebuild it if I have to. No one, not passengers, not staff, will be treated as less than human on my watch." The fight for justice had just begun, and Amina Jackson was ready to lead it.